Okay, I hope you enjoyed your break, and we are back, and we're going to talk about the balayage technique, which is one of the most talked about bleaching techniques that is currently out there. There are plenty of different ways to do balayage. There's a lot of confusion with this. Balayage is a technique, ombre is a style. You can use balayage methods when doing an ombre. So also know that balayage, it's French for sweeping. It's because you're taking the lightener and you're sweeping it up in a sweeping motion. That's where the name comes from. It's French. This has been around since the 1970s. In fact, there's ads from Clairol talking about sun-kissed looks, and they were using the balayage. Balayage is nothing new. It's just a current trend that's kind of starting to die out a little bit. I know that with balayage, one of the techniques you might hear is the teasing method, and I do not tease hair when I balayage. The reason being is that when you're teasing hair, you're putting mechanical stress in the hair. What happens when you remove a tease? It's difficult. You always remove the tease when it's dry. That's what we're taught in cosmetology school. What happens when the hair is wet? When you shampoo the hair, you wash the hair, you're going to wet that tease and it's going to create a knot to get out. Also, should you get any lightener on that teased area, you're going to increase your risk for breakage. So if you are from Jersey, go to Illustrated Beauty, IB Beauty. They do a class called Blendini, and that was a really good class that I learned how to do the Blendini technique, which is a non-teasing technique of balayage. There's the foliage technique where you're using foils but getting the balayage. Also know that when you're doing balayage, the goal of balayage is to create a natural sun-kissed look. You can also make it be more bold. If you want it more bold, use foil and do the foliage. Because you're having a closed air technique, you're going to let the hair lift more. On darker bases, like a level 1 through 5, you're going to get little results with the open air technique because the lightener will dry out. They do make clay-based lighteners. This was not included in there. So clay-based lighteners are lighteners with kaolin clay added. You can buy them in a store or go and buy kaolin clay at a health food store, add it to your lightener, and you can make your own clay-based lightener and save money. So clay-based lighteners, they work almost like the ice cream that you eat, where it's a chocolate coating in the outside and the inside is moist. That's how the clay-based lighteners work. They coat the hair, and to check, you gotta like hit it, break it, and then see what it looks like inside. Clay-based lighteners can be strong. You have to usually layer them to get a good result. Know that with balayage, saturation is key, and especially with ombre, when you're creating a gradation in color, the more you saturate, the lighter the result. So you're typically gonna saturate heavier on the mid-shaft and ends, and then feather your way up. So it's a lot lighter, and it's more of a gentle fade as opposed to a harsh line. So you can use powder lightener for balayage, you can use cream lightener, you can use a whole bunch of different things. You can even do a balayage technique with hair color. So the book gives you one technique. Their technique is the old school way. It's very, very subtle. You almost don't even realize the difference. So another thing I want to mention too at bleach, and something before I forget, students will ask me all the time, what about bleaches that are pigmented or bleaches that will color the hair at the same time? They're referring to usually, Joico had two, there was a copper one, a butterscotch one, and they also were referring to Magmar by Wella. What those are, it's a little bit different. You still have the same lightener ingredients per sulfates, but you have additional color ingredients in there that are going to be penetrated deep into the hair as the hair is being lifted, and it will be deposited. The issue with that though, right, so we work with chemists in hair color. If you're in product development, one of our grievances is one, color fades too fast. Then we want the color to last. But then our other problem is, oh, but we made this color that works too well. It lasts so good, it doesn't get out of the hair. That's how pigmented bleaches work, like the Magmar and the Joico pigmented lighteners. What happens is those ingredients get sucked in the hair, they get put in there, they're penetrated deep in the cortex. It's very difficult and near impossible to get them out. So when you do a Magmar, you want to be sure you want the highlights where you want them to go, because you're pretty much stuck with them. This is a commitment that you're going to have to grow out and cut off if you don't like it. And pretty much everyone at the ABCH pretty much agrees with me. At the summit, we had a whole discussion on this. Their chemist was really nice, how he answered their questions. Know that when doing those pigmented lighteners, and I'm not talking about your blue-based lighteners, that's something totally different. Your actual lighteners with colors inside of them, like reds, that they make it a vivid purple, vivid red, it is a lightener. So you also don't want to use it over hair that's been previously colored, because it will be very unpredictable. And you might think, oh, it'll lift your old color and it'll still give me a nice dark purple. If you don't do it right, you can get a very scary color. So that is that for special pigmented lighteners and balayage. The next one is toning highlighted and dimensionally colored hair. Pretty simple to do. Do the highlights, rinse the highlights out, tone them to the level that you want. You can do a non-oxidative toner with semi-permanent color. You can even do temporary color because the hair is porous. Also know that an oxidative toner will add color to the highlighted strands, but it can also cause a slight amount of lift in natural or pigmented hair. You always want to perform a strand test. The reason being is that some brands are a little too alkaline for demi colors, and they may contain a stronger amount of the alkalizing ingredient, so you could end up lifting the hair. I've had horror stories of people using Shades EQ, and someone, this is such a reckless thing to do, they let a client leave with the Shades EQ toner in their hair. They must have been, they did the highlights, I think they were toning at like a level 8 or something. They left the Shades EQ in the hair, the person left the salon with that in her hair, and she came back crying her eyes out because she decided to leave the Shades EQ in overnight, which is a no-no. It actually lifted all of her hair to about a level 8, level 9. That's how bad it was. It was a really nasty, like, goldish yellow color. So even though it says ammonia-free, know that there might be a slight degree of lift because you're still using peroxide. The Lanza color I use, we have a demi developer, so we have your 1 tube of color, and the demi developer will dissolve some of the ammonia, and then when you want to make it like a demi-translucent, you add a catalyst in there, and that dissolves a lot of the ammonia, and you don't get lift with that. Know that semi-permanent color is a lot safer. That's the old school way. Manic Panic Virgin Snow Toner is one of the best in my book. I love to use it. Everyone in the salon thought I was nuts when I used it. And a demi-permanent color can also be used to deposit color. It will not cause additional lightening, and it lasts longer than a temporary or semi-permanent color. You can even use, back in the day, the old school way was doing permanent color. You can do permanent color over highlights, but be mindful that it will take like that. You also run the risk of further lifting the hair. So demis, you want to make sure that you're using one that is going to provide minimal to no lift. Some of them might. You just got to be very careful. I know some stylists are very careful to paint only the highlights. I've done it the old school way. You're just trying to throw it on everywhere, and it works. So just know your brand. The next thing they give you is something that is really not professional. It's called a highlighting shampoo. And highlighting shampoos are defined as colors that are prepared by combining permanent hair color, hydrogen peroxide, and shampoo. So it's kind of almost like a soap cap. They are used when a slight change in a hair shade is desired or when the client's hair processes very rapidly. The process highlights the hair's natural color in a single application. No patch test is required. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. I do not know what exactly a highlighting shampoo is. I know there are shampoos in the market that claim to bring out the highlights, or they'll lighten hair with each wash. John Frieda had a whole blonde line with that, and you got to be really careful because it does contain hydrogen peroxide, and peroxide residues stay active for 2 to 3 days after. And what happens is if you have those residues on your hair, it can react violently with other surfaces as well as weaken the hair strand. So the other thing that they don't mention here, but they call them a bleach bath, and what that is, or they'll call it a French shampoo, which drives me crazy because it's just call it what it is, a bleach bath. The other tacky term, if you want to know it, is Lanza calls it a beauty bath, and I'm like, it's bleach. The purpose of it is if you want to just quickly get everything lighter really quick, you'll mix the lightener with the developer and then mix some shampoo in there and shampoo it through the person's hair, leave it on for like 5-10 minutes and then check, and it lightens everything up, and then you put your color over it. That's a really old school technique. Now we have base bumpers, and base bumpers, there's so many ways to base bump the hair. We were doing it back in the day with high lift hair color and like double 10 or double 20 to bump the hair 1 or 2 shades. You can do the lightest blonde shade, or you can even do the clear shade, which is just the alkalizer, whether it be ammonia or if you're using an ammonia-free permanent line, your MEA. That with 10, 20 volume or higher if you want more of a bump. Put it all over, 10 minutes, take it off, and then highlight over it because you have everything that's lighter. But now, I guess to an extent some of us are lazy, you can get it pre-mixed. I always say think like a chemist, have fun with it. Redken Shades EQ, not Shades EQ, Redken color gels. Back in the day, the original one, what we would do is take the clear, which is just pure ammonia. We'd mix it with 20 or 30 volume, put it everywhere, and you get a great like 2 shades of lift, 2 to 2.5 shades, and you can control that. So if you did a 10 volume, you get like 1 to 1.5. So now we get on to the fun part, and this is color corrections, which is something that I love. Everyone hates it. When you come for a color correction, you will have a combination of things. You will either feel really nauseous and throw up, get diarrhea, start to throw up, and then swallow it, or a combination of all three. Some of you might have some panic attacks. Some people might faint. Color corrections are very scary. Typically I find that they're very scary when you're responsible for it. So when you do something wrong and then you have to fix it then and there, and then you're backed up, and then it gets, anxiety provoking. Guess what? We're all human, mistakes happen. But knowing good hair color can help you prevent that. And one of the biggest things that I see people fail on is they overpromise and underdeliver, and that's they get into the dangerous territory. If you feel like you shouldn't be doing something, chances are you should not do it. And that's where you talk to the client like, hey, I understand what you want. I'll try to help you get there, but this is something that will take a working relationship we're gonna have to work to get at. I said we can't get this in one day, but we'll do the best we can now, and then you'll come back in 2 weeks and I'll see what I can do. Typically 2 weeks is the magic number per service. There's been cases where I've actually shortened that. If you use good judgment and the hair is really good, you can send them home and have them come home the next morning because you've given the hair time to rest, or do like 1 or 2 days, or even giving them the option if their hair is healthy. When can you come back? When's the longest you can go without having me make this lighter? And typically they'll give you a response of like 2 or 3 days, and I'm like, fine. If you are using that one client, you're being slow and steady to work on them, make sure that you charge accordingly. Never undercharge your services. This is a luxury service, they must pay. You wouldn't go into your doctor and say, if you're getting plastic surgery or some kind of elective surgery, you would never go in there and say, well, I want you to make one boob bigger, or if you're doing Botox, just Botox half my face, and this and that. Or if you came in for a whole workup, you wouldn't say, oh, I know you took an hour to do all my plastic surgery, but can you maybe give this? You wouldn't haggle with a plastic surgeon. Why would you haggle with a colorist? And us colorists, we care more about our clients. We're almost like therapists too. And that's another good thing. If you are worried about therapy being expensive, get a good hair colorist, because we're the best listeners while the color's processing. Anyhow, know that it's really important to have a good understanding about how hair works. You typically want to analyze a client's hair well. Know that the good news is that most hair coloring problems can be resolved or corrected as long as the colorist remains calm. If you freak out, you're going to freak your client out, and that's going to ruin the relationship. In all honesty, if you are responsible for messing up the client's hair, and even though you fix it, chances are the client will not come back. There is a very small chance he or she will come back, and that's just a heads up. So know that gray hair has some challenges and solutions. Gray hair is caused by reduction of the pigment in the cortical layer. Gray, white, salt, and pepper hair all have characteristics that present unique coloring challenges. Know that gray hair can turn orange if lightener is used and not processed long enough. People always assume that with gray hair, it'll just go super blonde. That's not always true. If there is enough of that natural pigment in there and you put the gray over it, the bleach over the gray hair, this few pigmented hairs in the gray hair will start to light up with color, and they can be very orange, and you're like, oh my gosh. Also know that if the client's taking medication, that will grow out with the gray, so it might turn like a yellow color. That can all be resolved by using a demineralizing treatment like Malibu C or a hair chelator. So know that you can fix a lot of the gray issues with some color services. So another problem is yellowed hair, and this can occur with gray hair that develops yellow cast because of either smoking, medication, sun exposure, hairsprays, and styling aids. Know that when you expose gray hair or white hair to the sun, it does not make it lighter. You can actually cause a bleaching effect and cause it to turn like an off-cast yellow. So I've heard people say all the time when they get their hair done, they get beautiful toner done, and they want to go blonder, they'll say, oh, sit out in the sun. Don't do that, because that will lighten your natural hair. And then you're coming back screaming at your stylist saying, my color didn't last, now my hair looks orange, da 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 da. And I'm like, well, did you sit out in the sun? They go, yeah, I sat out in the sun. I'm like, well, that explains it. So know that lightener and hair color can remove yellow discoloration. Typically, if the hair is yellow, just throw a semi-permanent color in it, because that can tone it down, or use a good purple shampoo. Know that undesired yellow can often be overpowered by artificial pigments by a violet-based color, whether it be a purple shampoo or a semi-permanent color. Manic Panic Virgin Snow toner may work. So when you formulate for gray hair, I'm going to disagree with the book on this. The book says that a level 8 or lighter color may not give complete coverage because of the low concentration of dye. When you think of hair color levels, think of it like this. Level 1 is this much pigment and saturation. Level 5 is this much perfect half and half, this much pigment, this much alkalizer. Level 10 is very, very little pigment and a majority alkalizer. You can successfully color gray or white hair with a level 8. The key is to use a lower volume developer. I know people were saying 20 volume. I've gotten great coverage of gray using 10 volume because people get into this mindset that gray hair is resistant. That's more of the texture. Some gray hair may be resistant. It's important to know what you're dealing with. Feel it. If it feels coarse and rough, then it is resistant. I've used 10 volume developer, colored on damp hair, 45 minutes, got great results. You can even do what I call double pigmentation. You'll color the hair with a lighter shade, and this is what I do for my gram because she wants to be like this really rich blonde, and typically it's very hard to cover hair with a level 10 that is gray. That I will agree with. Typically 8 is a magic number. 8 and below you can cover gray successfully. Level 9 you actually can cover gray. If the hair is fine, it accepts a lot better. I use a level 10 on my gram, and we do a gold base, and we do 45 minutes of the color, and then I take it out and then I do a quick refresh with a pure 10G toner because cool hair like gray hair rejects warmth, so the gold accepts it a lot better and it looks incredible. So that's double pigmentation, and we charge for a color and a glaze if you're doing it on a client. So with clients that are 80 to 100% gray, a hair color in the blonde range is more flattering than a darker shade for different reasons. One of the reasons is when a client has white roots and you throw on dark color everywhere, when the roots grow out, they're gonna look like she's bald, and it'll come in like this really scary skunk-like look. So when you're working with clients that are transitioning and they're getting gray, and you can sometimes see this, it's really cool but scary for the client. You have to color accordingly, and part of it is working them up to that blonde without being too harsh. Sometimes you have to go in there with a color remover, put heavy highlights in there, and then color the regrowth, and it can be a process. But once you do that big process, you can do little maintenance touch-ups, and it will be more easier to maintain, and your client will thank you. So know that with gray hair, another issue with coverage is if you go too dark, it may show everything on their face. So if they have wrinkles or trying to hide, everything is now like, oh my gosh, in your face and harsh and very scary. That's another issue. What I'll do here is we're getting close to the 18-minute mark. I'm gonna break here, take your 5-minute break. When we come back, I'll tell you a really funny story about a client that I worked on when I was in cosmetology school, and we'll talk more about gray hair, 50 shades of gray hair. And then we will go into pre-softening, damaged hair, and fillers.